Dungeon Masters of Reddit, what is the most useless item you gave your party that they were still able to exploit? Magical rubber duck turns whatever body of water it is in slowly into the perfect bath. As in warm and bubbly chucked it in a piranha pit. About 20 minutes later the piranhas were all dead from poisoning via soap. Floaty rock that gains/loses buoyancy based on its temperature. As a warlock with prestidigitation and a rope I could use it to hover and float very slowly, had no way to steer but hey useful when stuck in a pit or on a high place. Rat flute that summons a horde of rats a la the Pied Piper, can also be used to control any rat-like being. Including a criminal known as the Rat simply because he's a snitch. Had a lot of fun with that. I gave my players a rock of gravity detection, which is exactly what it sounds like. They got it early on in the campaign and when dropped it would accelerate until terminal velocity to the nearest center of gravity. So basically it was a rock that would just act like a normal rock. Until way later in the campaign they found themselves floating aimlessly through the astral plane searching for the soul of another player trapped in a keep on a small chunk of land that had been previously transported to the astral plane. They didn't have much to go on as, well, they were essentially floating in a void. Then one of my players pulls out the rock of gravity detection. I tried to argue that it's just a rock so it just floats there, but due to what I thought was a clever wording, my own wording, they argued it should accelerate towards the nearest center of gravity. Yeah, they found the keep. I gave my players an amulet that lets them speak to rocks. The one player who picked it up spent most of that session talking to his new pet rock and would often interrogate rocks they find at scenes for information, usually getting either vague info or stuff they can clearly see already, because it's a rock. Later on another party member wanted to try talking to another rock, actually a pile of rocks made into a crude gravestone related to their character's backstory, only for the first party member to find out the amulet was cursed and they couldn't remove it. Later on they got it removed and had the amulet identified, where I revealed that the amulet only let them think they could speak to rocks and all the information they had asked of rocks was only information that was already known to them. They basically started using the now uncursed version of the amulet as a tool to ask me for information they had forgotten or needed clarity on, but in character rather than just ask me out of character, which was great. I homebrewed the Hat of Many Hats. It's a regular hat, but it's made of shift weave, so it can have the appearance of any other hat. It was part of a shop selling dodgy knockoffs of regular magical items, in this case, the Hat of Disguise. The halfling who always struggled with RP took it, and it became a great way to get her more involved in what her character would do. It started when she transmuted herself and I'm with stupid baseball cap to tease one of the other party members after he'd come up with some bullshit plan, which led to one of the other players asking what this mysterious baseball was, and she just ran with it that it was a game they used to play back in her home region when they were kids. All of a sudden, she had a backstory, rather than just being I'm short and I stab things. I'm sure she would have come into RP eventually, but it was like giving her a dressing up box and seeing her realize that she could actually do things that weren't just purely mechanical. Tweezers of boat bottling. You have gained the ability to put ships into bottles with these tweezers. MFERS were sneaking into dockyards at night and stealing entire fleets. And when the Navy finally caught on, they would sail away and toss said shrunken boats in bottles at the Navy boats following them, causing them to rapidly expand. Then they started to plan bottle boatception, putting bottled boats onto full-sized boats and then bottling that boat over and over again, effectively creating a dozen boats to rapidly expand in one town by tossing one bottle. I had to shut that down quick. Our DM had us in a mage tower, wanted us to sneak past 4 stone golems that reacted to sound. In a normal fight the golems would have absolutely wrecked us. He assumed we would stealth past, trying to teach us that every encounter does not need to end in a fight. DM forgot our ranger had silence, which he cast, and then we started whacking away at the golems. After a few rounds of doing no damage, we decided to roll strength checks and chucked all 4 golems out the window. We almost gained an entire level with the EXP we netted, and of course no lesson was learned and we continue to murder everything in our path. A random encounter in the woods got the players a crow mask that makes it so you can only call like a crow when wearing, based off a Slay the Spire item. It can be removed without issue, so it's a silly flavor item. However, the players are convinced it's the secret MacGuffin of this campaign and keep trying to use it for everything. Most times are failures. But a few times, the stars align and it somehow works. They used it to calm a weird mutated child down so that they could ask it questions to learn about an ambush. They used enlarge plus mask plus super high deception and performance roll to convince a cult that the fighter was a stronger god than the one they were worshipping. They constantly use it to make every town guard think they are too much trouble to be worth hassling. Once got snapped up in the jaws of an adult blue dragon who then flew his 80 feet directly in the air, and while I was in there I activated my immovable rod inside the dragon's throat. The dragon failed his roll on carefully moving backwards as to basically regurgitate the rod, so he was stuck. One of the other players used his sword of sharpness to cut off his wing, great rolls back to back there, and the dragon was stuck 80 feet in the air. The only non-melee character was me as a sorcerer, and I was out of spell slots, so we just left it there. We stumbled upon it an in-game week later, where it tried to bargain for its life back and its freedom. I had just learned fly, so I struck a deal saying I would release him under the conditions that he no longer harm any of my party or myself, and that he had to be available at my beck and call. Now I'm a level 10 wild magic sorcerer with a one-winged dragon who's eternally bound by honor to me. Party wizard in Pathfinder got bitten by a big nasty dragon and grabbed. One of the spellcasters threw freedom of movement on him, instantly escape grabs, but he chose not to and in fact crawled far enough into the mouth to see down the throat. The player then pulled out the Draconomicon, turned to the section on dragon anatomy, and showed the DM that dragons have a wider portion in their throat. He wanted to place a shaped wall of force there so that the dragon couldn't move from that spot. The game was derailed for a bit over the hilarity of pulling a dragon anatomy reference book. Maybe not exactly what you were looking for, but I've been looking for an excuse to tell this story. I had a party of wizard, ranger, druid, summoner and barbarian back in Pathfinder 1A. All of the party members except for the barbarian had some kind of pet, be it an animal companion, familiar, or just the menagerie of animals the druid accumulated. A few sessions in, and my barbarian sends me a text while the party's setting up camp. The barbarian volunteers to take a watch, and the next morning the rest of the party wakes up to the barbarian's new pet, Brock de Rock. Brock was a stone with eyes and a mouth crudely carved into him. Brock goes on adventures with the party and is mostly forgotten about until a premature fight with that arc's end boss. The boss wipes the floor with the party, leaving everyone unconscious except the barbarian who has single-digit HP. Not wanting to TPK, and with the boss in surprisingly worse shape than I expected, I have him taunt the barbarian and start to fly away. Brock is going to take his attack, the barbarian says, throwing his pet with all his might. Crit, max damage on the roll, boss drops to -1 hit points and face plants at the barbarian's feet for the coup de grace, also performed by Brock to finish what he started. And that's how our party's pet Rock gained a temporary flight speed of 40 feet, and favored enemy, verbose sorcerers. One of the players had gotten married to a pretty young NPC who wasn't an adventurer. So I gave him a ring of conjugal visits that would transport him to his wife for an hour, then send him back to the adventuring group. The ring worked twice a week and was intended as a joke. When the party was beaten up from a hard combat, he used the ring and asked his wife where the nearest temple was, then bought healing potions from the local cleric. Soon this became a thing, cure disease, healing, whatever. The ring became this guy's quick trip to the pharmacy, although he also always found a few moments for a quickie with his wife. Eventually he woke the up cleric at 3 a.m. to buy more potions. So I had the cleric throw a fit and yell at him never to come back. The player went back anyway, and the next time there was a bouncer at the temple door telling him to get lost. Well, first they found a young red dragon who was terrorizing a fishing village. And they TPK'd. Not because they attacked it. Because they tried to reason with it and asked it to light the torch, and it immediately complied while the mage was holding the torch. 3 died right away. The rogue, who always stayed in stealth, was detected and promptly attacked after that and eaten. I felt bad that the rolls went that way, so I made a call and had them saved by a roaming band of clerics and transported to a commune far away. They learned afterwards that a joke torch was not the quest they were looking for. My DM gave me an eye. Player here. We had an NPC stalking us through the travel portion of the campaign and would show up and do odd things like pull out his eye and show it to us, and then pop it back in, just gross stuff because he was undead. One time I used a pickpocket check to take it from him, and he insisted that I give it back to him. We were in the temple for the god of trickery, which we both worshipped, so I put his eye in the collection plate. He could either take it out and suffer the consequence, or lose the eye for good. That was a great moment. My party were camping in a barn and made friends with a goose. I allowed them to take the goose with them as a guard goose/emergency food. In the process of dungeon crawling they find a gold bracer. The cuff was a soul-bound item that would cause whoever wore it to randomly be possessed by a Lich King. With the idea that the next quest would be removing it from the affected party member. After thorough inspection the party discovered an evil aura surrounding the cuff. So they put it on the goose. The theory was that since the goose was chaotic neutral it would balance out the evil of the bracer. So now they had a chaotic neutral guard goose that would randomly be possessed by a neutral evil lich, take on the appearance of a zombie goose and cast random spells through a series of honks and hisses. I gave them a carpet, they used it to kill 6 people. Edit. They laid it on people and smothered and burnt them. The way they covered the 6 people was enlarge/reduce. They did kill guards without enlarging it, but that was why I gave it to them, so they could strangle the guards. But when we get to the leader of the cultists they realize they can double cast enlarge/reduce, making the already 20 feet by 20 feet, 80 feet by 80 feet. They did at first try to crush/smother them, but I decided I shouldn't let that work, so they set it on fire and I couldn't find a way around this. Moral of the story: wizards can make mundane items tools for mass murder. I gave them a carpet, they used it to kill 6 people. Edit. They laid it on people and smothered and burnt them. The way they covered the 6 people was enlarge/reduce. They did kill guards without enlarging it, but that was why I gave it to them, so they could strangle the guards. But when we get to the leader of the cultists they realize they can double cast enlarge/reduce, making the already 20 feet by 20 feet, 80 feet by 80 feet. They did at first try to crush/smother them, but I decided I shouldn't let that work, so they set it on fire and I couldn't find a way around this. Moral of the story: wizards can make mundane items tools for mass murder. Not mine, but the question reminded me of this post by you/Nico Berg. I created an NPC werewolf character that was supposed to be a major villain in the campaign and stalked the players. It was a higher level than the PCs, so the idea was that they would need to flee every encounter and take measures to avoid being followed. Having someone on their tail constantly tracking them that could and would actually kill them was supposed to inject a sense of urgency into the game. On the first encounter, the werewolf was shown methodically slaying a large group of town guards and a high-ranking paladin. The characters were around level 5 or so. The NPC was probably CR 12 and would scale as they leveled. They interrupted the combat, and the idea was that they would attempt to fight the werewolf, who didn't consider them a threat initially, and so wouldn't just murder the whole party, see it killing a high-level character, and go, oh shit, we need to run from it, while it slaughtered the rest of the guards. So at first, they rush in to help and attack the werewolf, doing little damage because they don't have silver weapons, and I gave this particular NPC a regeneration ability only stopped by silver. I have the werewolf attack one of the players with a secondary bite attack, which should put them to fairly low health without killing them outright. That player pauses for a moment, and then asks if he can try to block the attack with his hand. I'm not sure what he's getting at, but I humor him and say he can do that with a DC 10 dexterity check, although it won't affect what kind of damage he takes. He succeeds. He then asks if he can jam his hand into the werewolf's mouth. I say, sure, but he's probably going to bite it off, and you'll need a new hand. He says even better. I describe the werewolf doing so. The rest of combat continues until the player's turn, who seems undisturbed by the loss of a hand, and on his turn he says I activate Quail's Feather token to make a tree. This token is a magic one-time use item that creates a 5-foot diameter, 40-foot high tree. It's a handy utility item that our playgroup was fond of. Previously we'd used it to do things from just making bridges and crossing walls, to providing a druid with a way to use a particular spell in plant-less areas that require trees. It didn't seem to have much use here. I ask him where on the board he's activating it. He points at the werewolf. I say that the most that's going to do is knock the werewolf prone, and he gets a fairly easy save to prevent that. He smiles. No, it's in the werewolf. What? How? I was holding it when he ate my hand. Me and the rest of the party are kind of silent for a second. I'm trying to think of a valid reason why this won't work. I fail. The werewolf now has a 5-foot wide tree growing out of him. The fact that he has regeneration doesn't particularly help when little bits of him are plastered on walls 20 feet away. The entire party celebrated and they got a reward from the town and an ally in the paladin who was supposed to be dead. I had to make a new NPC. The Brooch of Glamour. It was a brooch made by a powerful wizard for his wife as a gift. 2 times per day it could have you looking your best. Body clean and fresh, all clothes perfectly clean, mended and as good as new, hair perfectly coiffed, makeup done the way you like it. It was meant to add some color, and the party wizard, a human woman, claimed it. There was talk of using it to fix and clean everyone's clothes, etc., discussions about whether it could mend armor, it couldn't, etc. But the real effect was during a showdown with a BBEG. The wizard also had a ring of fire resistance, as well as a unique item called a blast scepter. The blast scepter was sort of like a buffed wand of fireballs, but also gave the wearer resistance to both explosive damage and fire resistance. Stacked with the ring of fire resistance, the wizard would take 1/4 damage from fireballs, and no damage on a successful save, with huge saving throw bonuses. Facing off against the BBEG who happened to be a fire wizard, she taunted him out in the open to give her his best shot. Boom, huge enhanced fireball, smoke clears, and there stands the wizard without a scratch on her or even so much as a singe, except now her hair is done up in an elaborate style, her makeup is on point and her clothes are crisp and clean. She basically was immune to fireballs, but the psychological effect of giving your enemy your best shot and now their makeup and hair is done and their clothes are clean and pressed made the BBEG run for it. Psychological warfare at its finest. I found a homebrew item someplace called a used bag of holding. It basically covers everything you put in the bag with a thin layer of glitter. One of my players took this and began scraping off the glitter and collecting it. Eventually he had enough glitter bags to where he could use animate objects on it. The little shit would have several of these bags fly around and dump their contents on people, causing great confusion as the glitter would get in their eyes and hardly come off because it was sticky. Edit: I don't normally like to edit posts, but I just want to encourage everyone interested in playing D&D to play it. I stared over quarantine and have enjoyed myself immensely. If you're looking for a place to start and don't have a group of people that you can play with in person, I would recommend checking out the Dungeon Dudes on YouTube. While their guides are mostly meant for experienced players, they also run a Discord server that has hundreds if not thousands of players. As long as you are willing to learn and come with an open mind, I don't see why you can't start playing D&D.